It's really great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity and the honor that it is. My father-in-law, who I really respect and admire, he's really a mentor of mine, spent his life in retail, and he worked really hard and became one of the top managers in the Woolworth and Wilco company. And he opened big box stores in Riverside, California, Las Vegas, and Sacramento. Spent 27 years of his life with them, and things started to go kind of south for that company with the advent of other stores like, at that time, Kmart, and then eventually Walmart. And so he was let go after 27 years of being one of their top managers. When that happened, I was working in the TV news business, and I just thought, there's no such thing as job security. If something goes wrong in a company, you've spent your life working for that company, it can be gone in a heartbeat. And what they were doing, Wilco was doing, was letting go, cutting loose all their best managers because they were the highest paid. But they were also their best, and so it was only a matter of time until they really went off the map entirely. So I say that because that's really one of the reasons why I feel like I wanted to be a so-called entrepreneur, and I wanted to work for myself. There's no ceiling to what you can make. Of course, there's no basement either. You know, what you may not make or the debt you get into. And I really think my father-in-law, Ed Anderson, who I just spoke of, really summed it up really well when one time he was being complimented by one of his friends, and his friend was saying, well, gee, Ed, you're quite an entrepreneur. And he looked at me, in his way, he kind of said, well, entrepreneur, pile of manure, just depends on the day. Ed went on to start, after he was released from Wilco, a very successful chain of stores, retail stores, that were in the $6 and under range. It was called Six Star Factory Outlet, and then also Dilly Dally's, which is in Roy, which some of you may know of. Very successful entrepreneur. He's since retired. He worked those stores until he was over 70 years old. But he now is retired and enjoying life, working in his garden and for his church and for many other things. Well, I'm really happy to be here because I have a really good history with Weber State University. It was Weber State College when I first attended here, and that was in 1970. And I came here and I had not been a good student, and I'm going to get into that in a little more detail. But when I came here, I came on academic probation. That's not the way you want to get into a university or a school. It is not, but anyway, it really was good for me in my circumstance, because one of the classes that I was required to take was guided studies. And what that entailed was really teaching me how to study. And so I needed it. And the instructor, whom I can't remember his name, but he was a PhD. And he used to tell us at the start of almost every class, you know what? If I can be a PhD, anybody can be a PhD. And I thought, wow, that's great humility and great advice coming from this man. And I was dumb enough at the time to believe him. But I had a mother who had been very instrumental in telling me that she knew I had a lot of potential, and I think at times she thought it might be permanent potential. But she used to tell me I could be anything and do anything I wanted to do. I had a lot of talent, she'd say. And I know I gave her a lot of heartburn when she used to have to go to those parent-teacher conferences, and the teacher would say, oh, he doesn't listen, he's daydreaming, he's an underachiever, he's not achieving his potential. I don't know what to do. I'm sure she got really tired of hearing that. But I had a great father also, who was an Air Force sergeant, and he was really the hardest working man I ever knew. When he wasn't working during the day with the Air Force, he had a night job, And also he went to school part-time at night to get his college degree. He'd work at night as a night security guard. And so we didn't see a lot of my dad sometimes, and so my mom was left to a lot of the life lessons that we'd learned during the week, but on weekends we learned lots of life lessons from my dad. And I think that you've heard of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books that have been out. Everything I learned really about life and business came from my mom and dad through their examples. So I felt very fortunate to have a great mom and dad. Now I'm going to go back a little bit. Like I said, I was not a good student, but I'd kind of get along from grade to grade. And then finally, when I was in 7th grade, I discovered a passion, and that was rock music and playing the drums. Now, I didn't have a drum set. We couldn't afford a drum set, but I went and bought a pair of drumsticks, and we had Sears and Penny's catalogs, and those worked just fine for me at first. I'd turn the music up and I'd play along to the music with the drumsticks on the catalogs. That was my passion, and I would do it 3 or 4 hours a day. And so my mom saw that, and she encouraged me. I mean, kind of ridiculous, right? I was listening to really loud rock music, and she was encouraging me to continue. In fact, she talked to my dad, and my dad said, well, son, if you'll earn half the money, I'll put up the other half, and we will get you a drum set. So I was pretty excited about that. So at that time, we were living in South Florida, stationed at Homestead Air Force Base, and they have nasty grass down there. It's all crabgrass, Bermuda grass. And seriously, when you cut it, you really can't tell that you cut it, except it's just a little bit shorter. And I had a lawnmower from back here in the West, which was, a Briggs & Stratton that stood upright. It wasn't the kind that they mainly have now, where it's down there has a circular blade that goes around like this and cuts it better. No, I had the kind that was going around like this, chopping it, so I usually have to go over it 2 or 3 times. But I went out and I mowed lawns. My brother had a paper route, so he hated to collect. I hated to get up early in the morning at 5 o'clock. So we agreed that I'd be his collector. I'd collect on all of his customers. I loved it. All I had to do was go up there and smile, and I'd take credit for all of the good stuff that he did. And they'd give me tips, and I get to keep the tip money. That's all I got. But we saved enough money to where I could get that drum set. Now, it wasn't a full drum set, and it wasn't a great drum set. We got it at Kmart. So that tells you a lot about right there. It was not a Ludwig, it was not a Vox, it was not anything that was high profile and cool. But it made lots of noise, and that's all I wanted at the time. And so we put that drum set in my room that I shared with my brother. I kind of drove him out for several years. And I had a stereo there, so I'd turn the music on and play along with the music. And after doing that for quite a while, I was good enough to where the neighbor across the street on base, he was a professional organ player. And he came over one day and said, hey, you're playing the drums, I notice, because you could hear it around the neighborhood. And I said, yeah. He says, well, I hear you playing rock music. You ever play any jazz? And I said, well, no, not really. He says, can you play with brushes? And I said, what are they? The kind of... And anyway, he kind of blew me off after that. But I did get to where I was playing in some rock and roll bands. But the main thing I wanted to get across is I had a passion, and I was working at it really hard, even though everyone involved with my education would think I was really a slacker. But I was working really hard at the drums, and I loved it. So things went on like that for a while, and I was playing on weekends with a rock band where we were making, I think, $100 a gig, and played at the teen club that was there on the base on Friday nights and Saturday nights. And then my friends told me about a great job that they had working at the commissary, which on base is the grocery store. And there, young men like myself would work for tips. We would bag the groceries, take them out to the car, and you really learned there to smile, to be really polite, to compliment, and to schmooze. I became a schmoozer, which is really what you need a lot of times when you're starting your own business. You need to be able to communicate with people and be able to get your point across and get them to like you. So I became a schmoozer. But I was proud of it because I was making great tips. I think I earned more tips than most of the guys there. And I liked it, and I worked, and I did not consider that work. That was fun. And playing the drums was fun. So I had two little careers going on, and I really liked them. I didn't consider it work. Well, I was in 10th grade before I knew it, and I was in a class with a man named Daniel Fields, Mr. Fields. And he was teaching history. And I was carrying in some strange books, like The Human Mind. And he looked at that, and he had some questions. And then he saw me carry one day the Book of Mormon. He had even more questions. And then I was carrying in some other books about psychology and how to know yourself and things like that. So he stopped me one day and said, "Come in and see me after class." So I talked to him, and he says, "You know, I think you're a pretty okay guy. You're pretty smart." Now at this time, mind you, was in 1968. I had long hair, playing in a rock band. I had my own little scraggly mustache and beard, 4 or 5 hairs on each side. So I was pretty cool looking, I thought. Now, he said, "Have you ever thought about going to college? Has that thought ever entered your mind?" I says, "Well, my dad has preached that to me ever since I can remember. Get a college education." He says, "Well, I looked at your grade point average, and I'm thinking that you may want to pay some attention to that right about now, if you have any thoughts of going to college." And I said, "Well, that's nice of you to think of that." I said, "By the way, what was my grade point average?" He says, "Well, I think it's a little below a D minus." And the thing was, when it came to homework, I just didn't do it. I didn't do the book reports. I remember the most embarrassing time I can remember was I had to do an oral book report, and I chose the book Kon-Tiki. And it was about the flotilla that went from the Pacific Islands over to South America. And I'd read the little foreword in the front, and so I tried to give the book report from that. And the teacher really called me out on it. Now this was in a Quonset hut, which was at South Dade High School in Homestead, Florida. We didn't have any air conditioning. We'd keep the windows open, and gnats would fly into your eyes all during the class. And so I was swatting the gnats away, and he was telling me, "You didn't even read that book, did you?" And I went, "Oh, no." And I think he finally got to me that you can't keep doing this, trying to just fake it with your education. That was the first big life-changing experience I had right there. I started thinking, I really should plan on going to college. And if I'm going to go to college, I've got to change things, and I've got to start them right now. Well, our family was transferred from Homestead to Naha, Okinawa. And so I was transferred between my junior and senior year of high school. And a lot of times that's pretty traumatic for people when they're transferred at that time. But for me, I thought of it as a new beginning. And during that summer, I read a very important book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And some of the ideas in there still stick with me today, and I try to live those principles. But it helped me so much. And I had some great luck, or great fortune. I happened to become friends with a young guy there who was Mr. Kubasaki High School. That's the name of our high school. He was popular and well liked, and he was nice to everybody, and he also was the lead singer in a band. And when he found out I was a drummer, he says, "Man, we need a drummer in our band." And it so happens that the songs that they were playing were songs that I was playing in my bands back in Florida. So I just stepped right in, and they couldn't believe that I knew the drum sequence to Fresh Garbage by Spirit. But yeah, I did. I knew that. And other songs too, so boom. I was right into feeling in my element and having friends. And this guy was the greatest. I didn't have any friends, but he would introduce me to everybody. And our band would play at the teen clubs in not only where I lived, Naha, Okinawa, but in Kadena and at Machinado and these other Army and Marine bases, to where we were playing 2 to 3 times a week. And that was really awesome to have that opportunity to make a fresh start. And I wanted to take advantage of that to the fullest. So I committed to doing my homework. I was going to do that. And I even was playing football at the time over there. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to date until I have all my homework done. And so I didn't date for a long time. But I did meet a lot of girls because I was playing drums. You know, the cute drummer. Cute, I say, because I had the long hair and the few, you know, little pokes of hair coming out my face. It was a lot of fun, but also was beneficial to me. And I had another teacher who kind of took me under his wing when I turned in my first research paper in his English class. And when I turned it in, he said, Mr. Smith, because they called everybody Mr. and Mrs. over there. And that was the hardest school I had ever gone to, by far. I mean, the standards were high. The teachers were hand-picked from all of these applicants because they got to see the world. So they were good teachers. And he said, Mr. Smith, I'd like to see you after class. So I went in. I thought he was going to tell me how great my paper was. He says, this paper, and he slapped it on his desk, and he said, a paper like that would ruin you in college. I said, it would? He says, yeah, look at it. He had red marks all over it. And he says, I'm going to help you learn how to do a research paper. And you do want to go to college, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. So he took me under his wing. He helped me learn how to write and how to communicate and how to, what he said, do what the teacher's looking for. He says, you know, there's learning and then there's getting grades. He says, you have to learn how to get the grades, and then you've got to learn how to learn the stuff too. But right now, you've got to get the grades because you're stinking it up. So he helped me a lot. And my first report card that I got there, I had A's and A minuses, and then it came to international studies, and I had a C. And the teacher came and apologized to me. She said, oh, I didn't know you were a good student. I thought you were just kind of coasting through. I would have given you a higher grade. I would have had you come in and learn. I think what really threw her is that I didn't know the difference between domestic and foreign. I wrote this whole, paragraph on a test about domestic, thinking it was, about what was happening in Africa, because it sounded big, domestic. But even the teachers were looking out for me. And our band played for the teachers dances that they had and the get-togethers they had. And so, believe me, we got some stuff on the teachers. And so that's something that I could have used against them. Because they did some pretty crazy stuff when they were drinking there. But anyway, it was a good experience. And at the end of that year, I had learned a lot. My grade point average was up to, C plus, something like that. And so I still had a challenge getting into Weber State, which is where I wanted to go. My brother was here. And so I applied. I had several nice letters written by teachers that I, had not applied myself earlier in my educational career, but that I was really working towards it now, and I wanted more than anything else to be able to attend college. And so with those nice letters and with my slightly improved grade point average, it's really hard to pull up a D minus in just a year and a half. I mean, it's hard to do. But I came in, and as I mentioned, I had that guided studies class, and I learned how to study. And I went from academic probation on arriving at Weber State to an academic scholarship the next quarter. I was motivated. I wanted to learn. So that was my experience with Weber State, and that's why I have such a heartfelt feeling for Weber State, because it really helped me. And I thought the teachers were great. I had an English teacher, Mr. Dabb, who continued to read my papers, and he said, son, were you in the Vietnam War? And I said, well, no, I wasn't, because I was straight out of high school. He said, some of these papers, it's like you're really conflicted about things and you're searching for things. And so he helped me to figure out some of those things I was looking for. But very good instruction. After 2 years here at Weber State, I kind of thought I wanted to go into communications. And at that time, the best school of communications in our part of the world was at Brigham Young University. I never thought I'd go to BYU. I mean, I was pretty much a Utah man. My kids don't know that. My son Ryan and Daniel are back there. Because I've always been a BYU guy to them. Even when my son Daniel played golf for the University of Utah, I kind of became a Utah man, but I still had the BYU roots. But I went there because of their education school. Their communication school. And they actually had a television station where you could work on the air and you could practice your craft and kind of learn if you really wanted to do something like that. Now, I thought it was kind of appropriate and apropos when I saw a newspaper article in the student newspaper down there that was talking about the communications department and their TV station, and the headline was, "Funniest show in town." It's true. We were stumbling all over. We were tripping on our tongues in every story. We were scared to death. We didn't have a teleprompter, so we were kind of reading the story, and we didn't look smooth like the people on the newscast did. But it was a great experience. And plus you got the journalism side of things. You really learned, they started at the basics of journalism. You learned to write like you were writing for a newspaper. And you learned about finding out facts. What are the important things to get? What's the priority of things that you want to put in that story? How do you want to put them? And then you learn style on how to write. So I thought that was excellent. And then, it gradually got better, and we got a teleprompter, and life became good at BYU. And I even learned to like it down there. Well, to make a long story short, in some ways, I served an LDS mission to Sacramento. And while there, I got to work in the mission office, and I don't know if you know much about that, but I was the mission recorder and PR director the first time I was in. And we needed public relations. We had a huge populous mission there with lots of people, and there was lots of information, some of it true, some of it not true, that people wanted to, well, we thought they wanted to know more about. So my mission president, who was from Ogden, Lamar Buckner, an insurance man here in town, he's since passed away, but he wanted to have us be at the forefront of public relations. And I had a chance to talk with him, and he asked me what my interests were, when I leave the mission and things. And so I told him it was, really being able to communicate with the public, to write and explain. So he says, let's put together a public relations handbook for our mission. So I worked on that for several weeks, and we sent it out to different people in the mission. We'd have the opportunity to meet newsmakers. And by golly, it worked. We started getting newspaper articles with pictures in the newspapers. And I sent some to some of the television stations, and we got some interviews. They were real curious about what those huge dishes were at the church. What are you doing with those huge dishes that are outside the building? It was a satellite dish. And, the LDS Church was one of the first to really use those for worldwide communications, bouncing that signal off satellite down off of that dish and being able to pick it up, and having conferences and special messages and things sent there. They were really curious. That made a good story. So I had that going. So I came back from my mission and went back to BYU. Only had 1 year left, and I had met my sweetheart. Well, she was in Sacramento. She was actually the best friend of the mission president's youngest daughter. I didn't plan that, it just happened, but we both went to BYU for a year, and she decided she couldn't live without me, and I knew I couldn't live without her, so we got married. I finished up at BYU, but before I graduated, I actually got a job with Channel 2 as a news reporter. I started the same week as Michelle Milne. She was known as Michelle King on the air. We started the same week at Channel 2. I had, another semester. I was only halfway through that last semester to graduate, and I was working full time, and it was hard, and I couldn't really stay focused on some of my studies because here I am working the field I wanted to be in. But I tried to grind it out, but I got my first D that semester, and it was in religious studies. I know my parents couldn't believe that. What? But anyway, it was because I was working. And a funny story is that they gave me a press pass that I used in my car, and so, I mean, it's kind of like Weber State, any college campus, they have the security, and they take their job so seriously. I think they actually get a commission on the tickets they write. Okay, so one day I was parked, and I had my press pass right there on the dashboard, and I come out from a story. I have a deadline. I have to drive to Salt Lake to get it on the air, and there's a Rhino boot on my car. And I'd just been interviewing the campus, the school public relations director. So I went right back to his office, and I said, I got to show you something. I went out and I showed it. He says, you won't believe this, but a few weeks ago, Sister Kimball, who was the wife of the president of the church then, she was parked out front of the administration building, and her car got towed. They were very exuberant in their job. But anyway, he got that off, and I was able to get my story on. So, I was able to get into the field that I really wanted to be in at the time, and it was fun. It was exciting. Now, the best upward mobility in that industry is to move, to actually physically move from station to station, from market to market. I started in a relatively large market and a very sophisticated news market as far as television news goes. I mean, back at that time, Channel 2 and Channel 5 were fighting it out. Who could spend the most money and have the most cool-looking news product? And Helicopter, you had Chopper 5, and you had Channel 2, I forget what they call it, Two Together, Helicopter. And they were spending money like crazy. So anyway, I was able to have a news tape to send out to try to get other jobs. That looked fantastic. Looks like I was coming out of New York City or LA. So I took the job that paid the most, which was like $1,000 a month, back then. And my wife and I moved to Corpus Christi, Texas. Now that's down on the Gulf Coast, and that is a world away from Utah, a world away from what we've been doing. But I liked it, and I was reporting every day, and I told them I had an interest in financial reporting, and nobody at the station really wants to do financial reporting, so I did that as one of my specialties. And it wasn't too long after that I sent some other tapes out because it was hot and humid during the summer in Corpus Christi. My wife just found out she was pregnant. She wasn't too comfortable there in that heat and humidity. So Omaha, Nebraska, I got a great offer there to be their live news reporter and to be a weekend anchor and producer. Now that's important to me because I always liked working on my own, and being a weekend person, first of all, you're really kind of separated from the rest of the pack. You have the weekday news reporters, and then you have the weekend ones, and I was doing both, but my focus was on the weekend, and I got to control all that. I was the producer of the newscast. So it was a great thing for me. And also there I was their financial reporter. And I got to do some great series. They really gave me a lot of latitude. And one that I wanted to do is I wanted to do a story on some of the important business people who had come out of Omaha and who were, successful. One of the main ones was Willie Thiessen, who had started Godfather's Pizza. And so I was able to fly with him on a private jet of his from Omaha down to Austin, Texas, and go out and watch them open 2 new franchises there. And on the way, I spent about 10 hours with him. I was able to pick his brain on everything I wanted to ask him. He was very open, and when I got back home, I was talking with my wife Julie, and I said, I really don't think the guy's that much smarter than I am. It's just he found something he was really, really passionate about and wanted to do it. And he had started with one pizza store in the outskirts of Omaha. And he was able to parlay that into a really lean, mean franchising company. I was shocked when I went in because I thought, you'd see this massive operation of people working at desks and stuff. No, they only had 10 people in their franchise office. They all had several specific duties, and they were lean and mean, and they sold lots and lots of franchises. And then he eventually sold and made a ton of money. Well, anyway, from that, I kind of tucked that one away. That was another life-changing experience when I realized that, if he can do it, so can I. So at that point in time, my wife and I decided we were going to get out of the news business and we were going to get into business for ourselves. Now, of course, that was our dream. That was our goal. Unfortunately, we had no money. We were living from hand to mouth in the news business. I mean, we had a little bit of savings, but, we weren't making that much. And so we thought, what we need to do is we need to get back to Utah. And so I sent out some news tapes, and KSL liked what they saw because, it was a good TV market. And the thing they did differently, which was kind of scary, is you had to actually go out on your visit to the station, and you had to go out and report on a story. And they don't give you a great, headline story to do. You're doing something that's relatively small and obscure, and you've got to somehow make it come to life. So I was reporting that day on a fundraising event at Primary Children's Hospital. And man, I was just racking my brain on what to say about it. So I sat down at the typewriter, and to any of you that write anything, you got to sit down and get your fingers on the keyboard and start typing something, even if it's every good man deserves to, type anything. Just get started typing. And so I sat there and I started typing, and then some ideas came. So I wrote the story out, and it was going to be about 30 seconds, which in the news business is quite a bit of time. So I wrote that, and then I was just about to give the copy to the producer, and I thought, I need to redo it. I wrote the whole thing over again in a different way, gave it to him, and it must have been okay because they hired me. So my wife and I came back here, and we worked for Channel 5 for just over 2 years. I had some great times. I never regret any of the time I spent as a news reporter. It was interesting and different every day, and it was informative, and it taught me to be able to write and communicate ideas and things. That has helped me. I've used that all through the rest of my career in business. But we knew we were getting out, so that my mentor, Ed, my father-in-law, he at that time found a carpet cleaning business called Rainbow International. It was a carpet dyeing and restoration company, a cleaning company. It only cost $10,000 to get into it and have your equipment and your van and the whole works. So my wife and I took a second mortgage out on our house. All our earthly wealth of $10,000 went into that business. And my dad, who had taught education to us his whole life, was devastated because here I have a brother who went on to become a PhD and an educator. He taught here at Weber State for over 23 years. And so he had a son who was a PhD, a professor, his son who was on TV every night in the news, and now I'm going to be cleaning carpets. He could not believe it. He said, "What is wrong with you?" He was so disgusted. We turned our basement into a phone room where my wife could call and set up these carpet cleaning appointments. And we were so proud of it. And well, anyway, I was making more money after the first few months than I'd ever made in my life. I always had money in my wallet. It was a cash business. It was a great business. It's hard. It was really hard work. But it taught me that you really can do something if you put your mind to it. And we set goals, and this company helped you set goals. We set goals for every day. And we wouldn't stop work until we reached that goal, or at least we tried until 10 o'clock at night. We had weekly goals. We would reach those. Well, before we knew it, a year was over, and we were named the best new franchise of the entire company. And they'd added about 200 franchises that year. So we got a trip to Mexico. We went down there, and the president of the company, who was a multimillionaire, said, "How would you like to come to Waco, Texas, and learn to sell franchises?" So I went down there, and I didn't love it, because it was a terrible schedule. Get up at 5 in the morning, go to work at 6, stay there till noon, go back home, spend a little time with your family, go back at 5 o'clock, work until 10. It's horrible. You don't have any time. I had 2 young kids, Ryan was just a baby. In fact, one day we had a centipede and some other, what was the other thing? The scorpion sitting on his arm when I was holding him, and but he was a youngster, he was just a baby, and then his older sister was 2 years old. I didn't have time to see them, and so I only lasted there 6 months. It was a tough 6 months, but you know what? I learned a lot. Being around this guy, he was a sharp man. He was careful, and he was cautious, and he was smart, and he was a money-making machine. And I learned from him. When I came back, I worked, at a job for a while, and then I prayed for a career direction, and another life-changing experience happened. A friend of mine who had been a next-door neighbor in West Point had started a company called the Pro Image, and they had one store, a kiosk in Salt Lake. I went and talked to him, and he says, "What have you been doing?" I said, "Well, I've been selling franchises." Ding! This light goes off. He hires me on the spot, and I start work the next day. And so that was a great experience because I was able to put what I'd learned in Waco, Texas, the armpit of the free world, to a good use. And I was able to help that company. I was one of their sales representatives. I didn't have a big title or anything, but I had a lot of knowledge. We sold 60 stores our first year. And the PR campaign I ran for that was 0 to 60 in 1 year. And that was picked up by several news outlets and did interviews with us and things. But that got me into business. A type of business that had a lot more upside without the hard manual labor. I did that for about 3 years. And also one of the perks that they allowed was that you got franchise fees where I was able to actually open stores and flip them. And they were some of the best stores the company had because my father-in-law, Ed, the retail man, was helping me pick the locations. He was brilliant at that, helped me get the merchandise in. So we had stores in Las Vegas and in Memphis and in Dallas and in Houston, and got those running, and then was able to sell those to people in the community. So that was the first wealth that I ever had. So it wasn't long after that before we said, let's take a family vacation. So my wife set it up. We went to Disneyland. We went to San Diego and visited SeaWorld and the zoo. Ryan was just a baby, cried all the way down there in the car. I reminded him that once in a while. And when we were coming back, we thought, this was a ton of fun, but sure was expensive. Sure was expensive. So we, kind of filed that one away in the memory bank. And before long, I was looking for something to do after I left the Pro Image. And so we thought, my wife and a friend who lives in our neighborhood went out and they decided they were going to do something really unusual. They're going to go become reservationists at Eastern Airlines so they could get the travel benefits. So they went down there and they learned all about reservations and learned how to take care of people on the telephone. And so we got to travel to New York City and Washington, D.C., and went to New Orleans and L.A. and several places. So she had some experience that way. I had some marketing experience, and I had a lot of desire to start a company. So we started a travel company. I just read a book called Sell Them in Bunches Like Bananas. And I pondered that as I went down to Southern California to meet with hotels who were going to take a chance on us. Because I told them we'd just sell their vacant inventory. It's perishable. If you don't sell it, it's gone. And so he said, all right, well, we'll give you a chance to sell that. It's not out anything. Well, I said, what I want, though, is I want your best rate, and I'll give you lots and lots of publicity. And so they said, okay. So they signed up. They were willing to take a chance on us. So I came back to Utah, and I thought, now I've got to produce. So I thought, sell them in bunches like bananas. I went out to Thiokol Corporation. I said, you know what? I've got a program here that will cost your employees less. You can tout it as a benefit. They said, hey, yeah, I like that. They signed on. I went to Kennecott Steel. They signed on. I went to the state of Utah. They signed on. I went to Hill Air Force Base. They got greater prices than we got, but they still signed on. And then I had several school district foundations that signed on, credit unions that signed on, and we were up and running. We did over $1 million in business our first year. We really wanted to have a great company, And I'd read and I'd listened to thousands of hours of tape programs, of positive thinking programs. Whenever I was doing carpet cleaning, I had a set of headphones on, and I was listening to brilliant people talk about brilliant things and how to be your best. We wanted a great company. So we said, we are going to have the best customer service that's available. We want everyone's trip to be as good as the trip that we have ourselves. And we know things go wrong when you travel. They go wrong for us. They still go wrong for us. I'm over in Europe, and our transfer doesn't show up, and we're stuck at the dock standing there with our suitcases. It still happens, So we said, we want to take care of those things that go wrong for people because they know they go wrong. So we decided we were going to have what we call killer customer service. We wanted to be perfect. We wanted to have perfection, but we know that's not really possible. But we devised a system of when we take reservations, we can double and triple check those. We record every phone call so that we know what is said during the conversation, so we can know if our agent told them the right stuff. And then we call that guest before they go on vacation, and we call them or text them while they're out on their vacation to solve any problems, because we don't want them to have a problem. We want them to have a great experience, just like we have. So excellence every day became our motto. And we had those in every room in the entire building. Excellence every day. That's what we wanted to bring to the table for these clients of ours. So we grew and we grew and we grew to where we were, before we knew it, the first company that Disney had ever given an actual contract to that wasn't a mega corporation like an airline. But they gave us a contract to sell their tickets. When we started out, a ticket could be purchased. It was a one-day ticket for the only park they had for $23. So that was ancient history. I mean, there were dinosaurs roaming around when they were $23. Now they're $230 for a 3-day park hopper ticket. But we sell more than anybody. But more than that, we have a great relationship with our customers. They trust us. And the thing I didn't tell you is that we also survey every one of those customers. We send out a simple survey to them, and the survey says, we'd like you to rate your satisfaction with our performance and customer service on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best. How would you rate us? And then if we are not a 10, tell us what we could have done to become a 10. And I read every one of those, and the staff knows I read every one of those, and I care. It's important. It hurts me when I hear someone say that something went wrong, because that made their vacation not as great as it could have been. Now, through our call and our text to them, hopefully we've been able to pick up on that, and we were able to solve it while they're out there so they can continue on with their great vacation. Well, that really sums up a lot of what I feel about business. It was the same with Pretzel Maker. Starting that, my wife had smelled these great smelling aromas in a mall, and she went to find out what it was, and it said, no cholesterol, no fat, no kidding. And she came home and told me that, and I said, that's perfect. And I had been in hundreds and hundreds of malls putting in pro image stores, and so we thought that could really be a winner. So I bought the ability to franchise that from the founder of that company, changed the name from Pretzelvania, which is a cute name, but you know what? When you're calling mall leasing people, they say, what? We changed it to Pretzel Maker, which is very simple and easy to grasp. And so we sold 50 stores our first year, 200 stores within the first 3 years. I had a group in Colorado who wanted to buy 50 stores, and I said, you know what? What's better? Buy the whole company. They ended up buying the whole company. Because at that time, Getaway Today was going bonkers. And Pretzel Maker was going bonkers. And we just had a new son. My wife was saying, something's got to give, and it's not going to be him. So I sold that company. But thanks for the time to be able to come in and talk with you. I really believe that you can be what you want to be. it's true. If I can do it, you can do it. There's nothing that special or or extraordinary about me. Some people said at times, "Gee, you're a real big shot." I said, "No, all a big shot is a little shot that keeps on shooting," and that's how I feel myself. I'm just a regular guy who found something he really loved to do, and he wanted to take care of people, and that has been the formula. Find your own formula for what you want to do. It's out there, and you can do it. Especially if you want to work for yourself. You don't like working for other people. You like to work for yourself. You don't like getting orders from people. I never liked that. My dad was an Air Force sergeant, so I didn't like that so much. You can do it. Thanks for your time. Now, we have questions. If you want to ask questions, there's food back there now. Probably went a little long on some of the basic stuff, but questions. Who would like to? While you're thinking about that, my son Daniel and Ryan are here, and they've started a company called Silver Fox. It's an SEO company, and it's also a marketing company. And they've been gracious enough to offer me a position in the company as chairman. And I really enjoy being able to work with my sons, who have shown so much dedication to what they're doing. So your question.
That was good. When you were the top carpet cleaner when you first started that business, and you're now the top selling Disneyland vacations that you do today, could you attribute that to one thing? Could you pin that down to your dedication? Dedication to it, or is it your enthusiasm, you think? Or
well, I was kind of a perfectionist, and it maybe it seems incongruent, someone who wasn't a great student who could be a perfectionist. But cleaning carpets, I really felt bad if I could not make that carpet sparkle, and so I would work at it as hard as I could, give it as much time as it needed. I'd go back as many times as the person needed. So I think just dedication to a really, really good job. And then with Getaway Today, I think the excellence, really striving for excellence, trying to take care of the people who really put you in business and keep you in business. I wanted to take good care of them.
One thing, so I've had the honor to work with my dad and Chuck on some different things. One thing he always says that sticks with me is he says there's never a money problem, there's only an ideas problem. And that's something that's kind of stuck with me in my life. So you never have a money problem, just an ideas problem. So that's something that I've learned from him. And anytime you're in need of some money, think of an idea that can make you some money and help out. So tell them about some of the stuff you did growing up, like making jewelry and selling it door to door. And just very creative ideas that if you ever needed money, he came up with an idea and went and accomplished it. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that happened right after I got back from my 2 years away in Sacramento. I wanted to take Julie out on dates. I had no money, and I was getting ready to go back to school. And so I knew how to make Indian jewelry, what they called back then turquoise jewelry, out of silver and turquoise. So I'd make these rings and bracelets and necklaces and things, and I'd just go out into the public and sell them. And again, I'd learned how to talk. I'd learned how to schmooze a little bit from the jobs I'd had before. And that's how I got my date money. And I could take the raw materials, which would maybe cost me $3, $4, and turn it into $20 to $30, really quick. And if it wasn't selling at that price, I could go down on the price, depending on how bad I needed the money and where Julie wanted to go.
Sounds like you've never been afraid of hard work.
I only now, hard physical work is tough because I probably ruined a few things in my back when I was doing the carpet cleaning, carrying equipment upstairs and things. But no, having a dad who was willing and able to work as hard as he did and sacrifice like he did for our family, I learned from a great example. And my mom was the same way. She was doing it in the house. We weren't upper class people by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we were good, solid, middle class people. My mom was a real hard worker in the home, and she really nurtured us kids. My dad worked outside the home really hard and made ends meet, and they saved money. You know, they had lived through, and the parents had lived through the Great Depression. They always had that fear of what was going to be around the corner. So I really had great examples on hard work. Justin.
So, being an entrepreneur is obviously not an easy thing. I'm sure along your journey you've had struggles or you've had hiccups in the road. What is it that keeps you going or keeps pushing through when you have those hard times? Or like maybe you feel like you can't go forward anymore. What drives you to keep pushing forward?
That's a good question. Goals. Goals helped me when I was a carpet cleaner get great satisfaction from realizing my daily goals. As long as you're working towards a worthwhile goal or objective, it doesn't really matter what the work is you're doing, because that became secondary to the idea of reaching my goal and objective, and the satisfaction and good feeling, and also knowing that I could take care of my family by doing that.
If you could give one piece of advice to anybody on, this side, what would that be? Any single bit of advice?
That's another great question, and I've thought about that a lot. I think the best thing I could say to you and to others is, you can do it. You can do it. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't reach and achieve your dreams. Walt Disney said, without dreams, how can dreams come true? And that's how I feel. You can do it. If I can do it, if that teacher who became a PhD could do it, you can do it. But there is a price that comes with it, and you have to determine, and this is the tough part, you have to determine if you're willing to pay the price that it takes to reach your goal and do what you want to do to reach your dreams. Anyone else? Anyone have a suggestion for me? Well, thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you for listening.